He was found in the water beyond the chamber he had wanted so badly to see. The unit was working, the lights were on, the reel lying beside him as if it had slipped from his hand a second earlier. The 27th of March, 1994, Sistema Huautla in Mexico, more than a kilometer down. Ian Rolland knew that machine better than the man who designed it. He had been its test pilot for 5 years. The equipment did not let him down. Something else did, and there is still no exact answer. And a few days later, the expedition made a decision that cavers have been arguing about for 30 years. Ian Michael Roland was born in 1965. British, an aircraft technician with the Royal Air Force. A job like any other. He spent his weekends underground, and by the age of 20, he was working down there the way most people never work even at 40. In 1985, the American engineer Bill Stone comes to England for the first time. He is invited to Wookey Hole in the Mendip Hills, one of the best-known underwater caves in Britain. The invitation comes from Rob Parker, one of the strongest British cave divers of that period. Stone arrives to work with a team put together for one specific job, to push further along the flooded passages than anyone before them. That is where he meets Roland. The lad has only just turned 20. Formally, he is nobody on that team, not a leader and not a record holder. His job is to haul loads down to the underground chamber 24 and back every single day. There are 5 sumps on the route, sections of passage completely filled with water, where the only way through is on scuba. 5 going in, 5 coming out, on a single run. Visibility is close to zero. Roland walks that route with kit bags almost as tall as he is, knows every turn by heart, and does it day after day. And he smiles while he does it. Stone would later single that detail out. The lad hauled loads through the dark, 10 dives a shift, and was perfectly happy with life. By 6 in the evening, he was reliably in the Queen Vic, the pub on the road above the cave, with a pint of local ale. You could set your watch by him. Many years later, he would put it into a single line. Here was a man worth knowing. An acquaintance that began with somebody else's load in murky water would last 9 years. It would end in a Mexican cave they went down into together. Roland's own home ground is in South Wales. Above the valley rises the limestone mountain of Langatic, unremarkable from the outside. Inside it lie 2 enormous systems, Agan Allwed and Darren Silao. Tens of kilometers of passages, shafts, and flooded sections. That is where he makes his name. In 1987, Roland dives beyond Sump 4 in Agan Allwed. That was the edge of the known. Beyond it, the map ran out, and the system was assumed to close down there. He passes the sump and comes out into dry passage on the far side. One dive pushes the limit of the system to a place where nobody expected it, and people begin to talk seriously about the young Briton. The work under Langatic goes on for years. Roland takes part in the discovery of the 7th-hour sump in Darren Silao. The name speaks for itself. To reach that point, you have to crawl, climb, and swim for 7 hours from the entrance. Later, he gives an interview to the British Caving Library about the exploration beyond St. David's Sump. The recordings survive, and in them you hear a man describing his own discoveries without any fuss at all, almost as everyday business. He also joins the Gwent rescue team and becomes a leading member of it, a detail that is easy to skip past, and that would be a mistake. He goes beyond the known on his own, and he is also the one who pulls people out of the very passages he dives. He knows the price of a mistake, and not from books. In the British caving community, he acquires a reputation of his own, not an expedition star, not a man who announces his plans loudly. 2 words come up again and again in what people say about him: initiative and modesty. Plus, something that does not fit into one word: complete calm, working alone, where there is nobody else at all. In Wales, they know him as one of their own. Roland stays the local lad who heads off under the mountain between shifts at work and comes back with a new piece of the map. By the end of the 80s, that piece had grown so large that he was being invited onto projects of a completely different scale. One of them is Wookey Hole again. The main push on the system is being prepared around Rob Parker. He is going for a record, an attempt to pass the sump beyond Chamber 25, the furthest flooded point in the system. An underground camp is set up for it, and Roland spends 5 days in Chamber 24. His role is a supporting one, agreed in advance. Prepare equipment, carry cylinders, stand safety cover, work out the logistics. Support does not dive at the sharp end. That is not its job. and everybody understands that. Rolland does his part honestly. And on the last day of the push, he quietly asks Parker one question. No meetings, no applications, just, "Mind if I have a look?" Then he leaves camp alone. With him, 3 cylinders of trimix and 1 of oxygen. Trimix is a breathing mix in which part of the nitrogen is replaced by helium. At great depth, ordinary air starts working against a person. And without a mix like that, you simply do not go there. Rolland descends almost to the mark Parker had reached. It was the first mixed dive of his life. Not a training run in shallow water, straight into a deep sump, alone, into a place the team had spent weeks preparing to enter. Stone only learns about it years later, from other people. Rolland himself never mentioned it. Not at the debrief, not in the report. He went, he came back, he packed up his kit and carried on doing his supporting job. Later, the caving community would call that episode his signature, initiative without announcing it, and a readiness to go alone where everyone else goes in a group. Stone remembered it as a virtue. In March 1994, that same trait would be picked apart in a very different way. From 1989, Bill Stone has an obsession of his own. He is an engineer, and what he keeps running into, by his own account, is not a person, but arithmetic. To explore flooded passages a kilometer down, you need a breathing supply that lasts many hours, and ordinary cylinders physically cannot be brought down there. There is nobody to carry that many of them through the shafts and squeezes. The answer is a closed-circuit unit. It scrubs the carbon dioxide out of the exhaled breath and returns the mix to the diver, stretching the same supply of gas many times over. The idea is not new, but in the late 80s nobody had yet tried to build such a device for a multi-day underground expedition. Stone builds it, and he needs a man who will dive it. Rolland dives it. Between 1989 and 1994, he spends more than 4 months in the United States in total, coming over for development, for testing, and for training again and again. And the unit keeps changing all the while. One version, a second, a third, each with new components and new ways of failing. The job title is short, test pilot. He dives raw prototypes, and after every dive, he breaks the machine's behavior down part by part. What breathed well, what ran hot, where the control logic throws a person off. Those reports are what reshape the design around the team's real needs. Stone would write it plainly. When yet another idea fell through and despair set in, it was Rolland's enthusiasm that pushed the project forward. He joked about his own role in his usual manner. Standing safety cover on somebody else's dive, he would say, "Now, if he gets bent, then I'm the one who's really in trouble." Joke or not, the role of test pilot means exactly one thing. He takes on the whole risk of new equipment failing first, voluntarily, and ahead of everyone else. By 1994, the unit is developed into the Mark IV, forerunner of the cis-lunar rebreathers. 9 sets are prepared for shipping to Mexico. Around 1992, 2 years before the Mexican expedition, something happens in Rolland's life that has nothing to do with caves. The doctors give him a diagnosis, diabetes. He becomes insulin dependent. For ordinary life, this is a manageable condition. A diet, monitoring the level of sugar in the blood, injections on schedule. Millions of people live like that for decades and do not consider themselves ill. For a man who is planning to spend several weeks underground more than a kilometer down and to dive into flooded passages while he is there, the picture is different. Underground, there is no schedule. The workload is unpredictable. Food is whatever you manage to bring with you. Sleep is broken, and any amount of time can pass between eating and working. A sharp drop in blood sugar brings weakness, confusion, and loss of consciousness. On the surface, that is unpleasant. In the water, it is far more dangerous. He reacts the way he always does. First, he works through the technical consequences, what this change in his body means for his work. Then he carries on at full power. The expedition's preparation schedule does not slip by a single day. And there is one conversation he does start himself. Rolland goes to Stone and asks him straight out whether the diagnosis will affect his place on the team. Stone would later describe his own position without trying to dress it up. Not one of them could have stood in Rolland's way, not after everything he had put into that unit. He was not a hired hand. That machine rested on him. The matter is settled quietly. It is not taken to the team, and it does not appear in the reports or in the expedition's medical plan. Formally, it is an ordinary working conversation between two friends, of the kind they had had hundreds of times. 2 years later, that conversation would become the central knot of the whole story, and it would be argued over by people who had not been in the room. On the 16th of January, Rolland flies into Maryland and moves into Stone's house. For 2 weeks, the pair of them finish organizing the expedition: lists, schedules, distribution of equipment, everything that has to be closed off before the main team arrives. Stone sees a different man in front of him now. Not the 20-year-old lad with the kit bags from the Mendip Hills, but a grown man, the same drive and the same devotion to the work, but a life arranged differently. Rolland is a family man now. There are photographs of the people close to him inside his helmet, and sometimes a small teddy bear strapped to the outside of it. That toy, by Stone's account, had been on more expeditions than most people manage in a lifetime. The expedition starts on the 2nd of February and will run for 135 days, 4.5 months of field work underground. The scale matches. 44 people, mostly from Britain and the United States. 11 of them are divers: Kenny Broad, Rob Parker, Barbara M. Inda, Noel Sloan, Steve Porter, James Brown, and others. In the support group is Rick Stanton, then still simply a strong British cave diver, and 24 years later, a participant in the most famous cave rescue in the world. The whole machine has one aim. In the cave of Sótano de San Agustín, at a depth of about 1,353 meters, there is a sump, a flooded tunnel that nobody had ever got past. It was found in 1977, and for 17 years it stayed a closed door. Technically, there was nothing to go through it with. Along with the unit, Rolland brings his own way of talking underground. He got the whole team used to an old Royal Air Force phrase, "chocks away," meaning it is time to act, and to its companion, which he delivered with unfailing irony: home for tea and medals. The Sierra Mazateca Mountains in the Mexican state of Oaxaca look deceptively peaceful: green slopes, coffee plantations, villages along the ridges. Beneath them lies Huautla, the deepest cave system in the Western Hemisphere. Vertical and full of water, a chain of shafts, ridges, and streams running down almost 1.5 kilometers. A cave like that is not done in a single trip. The descent is laid out as a chain of underground camps. Camp 3 is the intermediate base, where the team lives and recovers. Camp 5 is the last one, right at the water, at the entrance to the sump. From the first weeks, Rolland is in the front line, rigging ropes, carrying loads, planning the next push, and it is usually he who writes the list of jobs for the next day. At -300 meters, he and Kenny Broad are rigging ropes in the vertical section. They work with a hammer drill, setting bolts into the rock for the anchor points, and halfway through the job, the drill's battery dies. The normal reaction is to pack up and come back with a charged one. Rolland does otherwise. He takes the bit out of the drill, grips it in his bare fingers instead of a chuck, and sets the bolts by hand with a rock hammer. The anchors come out just as sound. The expedition schedule does not shift. At around 10 in the evening, Stone comes down the rope from above and shouts down Rolland's old joke, "The cavalry has arrived." Rolland looks up and grins. Ah, Mr. Stone, right on schedule. And he really had been right on schedule all those weeks. Every morning he brought a list to the communal breakfast. First it was rigging ropes, then supplying Camp 3. Towards the end, when there was not far left to go to the water, it was supplementary decompression tables that he had calculated himself for the first dives in the San Agustín sump. The end of March, the second month of the expedition. The lead pair are finishing off the last section of the lower gorge, a long, sloping passage down which the water runs into the depths of the system. At the bottom of the last shaft, Stone sees the thing it was all set up for, the start of the sump. He takes off his vertical gear, gets into the water, and swims across to a ledge on the other side, a side passage with a flat patch about a square meter in size. That patch had been used back in 1981 by members of an earlier expedition. Nothing here has changed since. When Rolland comes down from above, Stone greets him with the words, "Welcome to the San Agustín sump, Mr. Rolland." The reply comes in the same ceremonious tone the two of them had kept up for years. "Thank you, Mr. Stone, and it is very good to be here at last." It was said as an everyday matter, like everything he said, although half his life stood behind that sentence. Hammocks and platforms are hung right above the water. This is Camp 5, more than 1 kilometer below the entrance. There is no getting out of here quickly. Roland goes into the first diving group, along with Noel Sloan and Steve Porter. Over 3 days, they lay a guideline 250 meters into the flooded tunnel. The conditions there decide everything that follows. Visibility is close to zero. The floor and the walls are covered in silt that lifts at the slightest movement of a fin, and within a few seconds, the beam of the lamp runs into a wall of suspended particles. The only way to navigate is by the line you have laid out behind you. The water is cold, the passage winds, and ahead of you is the unknown. 250 meters in 3 days is very slow and a very great deal at the same time. After that, the group takes a break and climbs up to Camp 3 to rest. And down below, another man is asking to be let into the game. Kenny Broad is 27. He is a professional diver and a postgraduate student, younger than almost everyone on the diving team. He goes to the leadership with a request to be moved to Camp 5 and given a try at the sump. Roland immediately offers himself for the supporting role. He does not argue about who goes first beyond the end of the line, does not remind anyone whose group laid the first meters. He simply goes to back up somebody else's attempt, a job he has known by heart since he was 20. Broad extends the line noticeably further south straight away, and he brings back news more important than the meters themselves. The passage is getting shallower. The tunnel is rising. That almost always means it will come out to air somewhere ahead. The mood in camp turns right around. The two of them start diving in turn, taking it in shifts at the sharp end. One goes forward and lays line, the other rests and covers him, then the other way round. And that is how they work for several days on end, meter by meter. On the 11th dive, Broad surfaces. He finds himself in a large air-filled chamber 430 meters from the entrance to the sump. The chamber is huge by underground standards, about 12 meters wide and 50 long, with water and a sandy bank. Here you can take your mask off and breathe. Until that minute, there was simply no way of getting here. A door that had been closed since 1977 is open. There is a continuation beyond the sump, and it is a big one. Broad comes back through the tunnel to Roland, and both of them understand what has just happened. They have gone further than anyone in the history of this cave. Broad would later say of those days quite plainly, up to that moment, it was the most interesting thing that had ever happened to him. The 27th of March begins for Roland as an ordinary working shift. At 8 in the morning, he goes into the water from Camp 5. The dive is routine, a penetration of 380 meters, 53 minutes underwater, a maximum depth of 26 meters. He comes back. The unit worked as it should. By 11, Broad goes into the water and surfaces again, in that same air-filled chamber, carrying on the exploration. At around 4 in the afternoon, it is Roland's turn. On paper, the task is simple, to look over the new ground beyond the chamber. Beyond the air chamber, the passage goes back underwater, the start of the next flooded section, which would later be called Sump 2. Nobody knows what is in it. Nobody has looked in there yet. Roland pulls on his wetsuit. He is going alone, as at Wookiee Hole, as under Langatic, as throughout his underground life. The last words he says to Broad come in his usual manner, no grand tone and no anxiety. He delivers the very phrase the two of them had traded all expedition. If I'm not back by 10 tonight, call in the cavalry. Then he goes down into the water and sets off along the line. Broad stays on the ledge alone and starts counting. Formally, everything is in order. The unit is working, the plan is clear, the exploration is a short one. The route to the chamber has been done more than 10 times already. Roland has as much experience as only a handful of people in the world. Every prototype of this machine has been through his hands, hundreds of dives in murky water, first explorations in 2 British systems. There are 2 differences. Beyond the chamber, there is no line, no map, and no second person who would notice something was wrong. And this is already his second trip into the water that day, after several days of diving in a row, with diabetes that only one man on the team knows about. At 10 in the evening, Roland does not come back. Waiting underground is hard for a particular reason. Time down there stretches and contracts, and you cannot rely on what you feel. What is left is the numbers on the gauge and the light of a lamp above the water. The first hours pass as routine. Exploring a new section can take any amount of time. A man finds a continuation, keeps laying line, loses track of the hours. That happens all the time. By the end of the 6th hour, underwater, it becomes clear that the time is up. Broad does the only thing he can do in his position. He leaves a light burning on the ledge, a marker in case Rolland comes back while he himself is away. Then he starts the climb. Distance decides everything here. Between Camp 5 and Camp 3 lies a journey of many hours up the vertical passage. Shafts, ropes, tight spots, running water. Broad goes it alone, after several days of hard diving, knowing that help will not get back down here in under 24 hours anyway. At around midnight, he reaches Camp 3 and wakes stone. The news fits into 2 sentences, and they are the opposite of each other. The sump has been passed. Ian has not come back. What begins then is called a search in cave diving, only by name. A man in a flooded passage can only be looked for by another diver, with the same unit, along the same line, in the same zero visibility. Every such trip is a risk in its own right. The next day they find him, in the water, just beyond the air chamber. Everything about the scene was utterly ordinary. Equipment in working order, light on, guideline in place. That is not what an accident looks like. It looks like a shift interrupted halfway through. Now the ones who are left look at the map. From the place where he died to daylight is several days of travel upward. On that route there are shafts, climbs, squeezes, sections under falling water, and a flooded tunnel 430 meters long that has to be passed underwater first. In many underground tragedies, this is the point where a hard but understandable decision is taken, to leave the man who died where he died. The risk to the rescuers is too great, and there is nothing to be gained. The expedition of 1994 decides otherwise. They are going to bring him up. The operation takes 6 days and turns into a separate expedition inside the expedition. A medevac litter is dragged over climbs, hauled up vertical shafts on ropes, pulled through running water. Every meter is won by hand. Practically the whole team takes part, including Broad, who a week earlier had been celebrating the breakthrough of the century with Rolland, and all of it now serves no purpose but one. You do not leave a friend underground. Up on the surface, his body is brought to a Mazatec village on the plateau. The people gather to say goodbye. The farewell is held in Mazatec, the local language of this part of Oaxaca. People who had only seen these foreigners from a distance and had no idea why they climbed into holes in the ground come almost to a man. The same day, the body is taken to the city of Oaxaca for a postmortem. For the expedition, this is the first time everything physically stops. Not an argument and not exhaustion. Simply nowhere left to go until this is finished. All that week, nobody said out loud even once what would happen next. The question had been hanging in the air since that night at Camp 3. The postmortem in Oaxaca provides the grounds for one version, and it remains the main one to this day. It is believed that Rolland lost consciousness from hypoglycemia, a sharp drop in the level of sugar in the blood. The arguments line up 1-to-1. Insulin-dependent diabetes, heavy physical work several days in a row, a long day with a dive at 8 in the morning and going into the water again at 4 in the afternoon. No proper food before the exploration. In a combination like that, the risk of losing consciousness underwater becomes real. And yet this is a version, not an expert's verdict. There is no direct evidence of the mechanism. The conclusion rests on the circumstances and on the known diagnosis, and not on an indisputable picture. Some of the expedition members read the results of the postmortem exactly that way. Other sources put it more cautiously. The most likely cause, not the established one. One question, though, is closed completely. The data logger on Rolland's unit preserved the record of the last dive. The examination showed the unit performed flawlessly from beginning to end. The prototype that had been considered the main risk of the whole expedition had nothing to do with the death of a man. And in camp, something is ripening that the reports describe sparingly. A hard argument. Wrap up or carry on. The positions diverge sharply. Part of the team leaves the expedition and goes back to the United States, taking stories of the split with them. Their argument needs no explaining. A man has died. The expedition has lost the right to go further. Others insist on the opposite. Rolland had been working towards this sump for 9 years and would not have understood a retreat. To stop would mean devaluing everything he had put into it. The decision in the end rests with the leader of the expedition. The team, half of it gone, and all of it burned out, is pulled through by an outsider. The cameraman Wes Skiles arrives on the plateau on assignment from National Geographic. He films the expedition and, along the way, gives it back its meaning. The members would later admit it plainly. If Skiles had not gathered them back together, nobody would have gone on. Part of the team, meanwhile, openly criticized Stone's hard style of leadership, and that criticism has not gone anywhere. Broad goes back underground a few days after the body is brought up. He would later describe those weeks in one phrase: from the highest point of his life to the lowest. On the 8th of April, Stone passes Sump 2, the very section Rolland went into. Its length turned out to be 170 meters. On the 1st of May, Stone and Barbara M. Ende go through both sumps and set up Camp 6 beyond them. They spend 18 days underground, 6 of them filming and surveying the new passages. The result is 3.3 kilometers of previously unknown galleries and a mark of minus 1,475 meters. Huautla takes back the title of the deepest cave in the Western Hemisphere and enters the top 5 in the world. What stops them is Sump 9 and the calendar. The rainy season is coming when the shafts and gorges fill with water and turn into a trap. The air chamber beyond the first sump is given Rolland's name. It is still called that on the maps of the system today, the only memorial standing exactly where it all happened. The unit worked, the experience was there, the plan was achievable, and most likely it was not the cave and not the equipment, but his own body. And the argument over whether they had the right to go on is still not closed in the caving community. 30 years on, people still answer it in different ways.